Thanks very much. I'm going to give an overview kind of conversation that actually will be somewhat brief. Yes, using this new technology called Prezi. So this is my very first time doing a Prezi in public, but I think it will be fine. So we want to look at registries, I think, this afternoon, and we're going to look at them in a number of ways. We're going to drill down deeply into several important and comprehensive ones, but also want to kind of give an overarching framework. So if we believe it's the ultimate data capture, and I do agree with the speakers before me who said it's really important that these cohorts be developed and this data be captured early on, then there's a couple of questions that we want to look at as we go along. So let's first look at the current state of registries. And while I thought about this topic, you're going to do it? Okay. While I thought about this topic, I thought it's really not possible for us to look at every single registry or kind of registry that's available, or even look at the breadth of registries that are currently available. Next slide. So one of the things that we want to look at is that we have heard a lot today about either project-based or disease-based, and yesterday as well, registries, and that also these registries come from academia, they come from industry, they come from advocacy, and there's even a couple of other hybrids out there. But there are thousands and thousands of them, and one question we need to ask is, are there ways to aggregate this information beyond these silos that are being built? I, in fact, created a registry and biobank for a disease group, the disease my kids have, pseudoxanthoma elasticum, under the auspices of a foundation that I created, PXE International. And the things you see on this image are all the things that we were able to develop because of the registry. It's a rare disease, 1 in 100,000 people. It causes legal blindness and cardiovascular disease. We have 4,000 people in the registry. Each has answered 900 fields of data and brought in hundreds of medical records. They do that every year. It's absolutely true that people want to keep contributing, as Charlie said, to registries. They want to answer a survey every year if they can. Their physicians are also quite interested. And so the robustness of this registry gave us a platform to be able to do a lot of studies, to publish dozens and dozens of papers, and to go all the way into drug screening and drug development. So one could then ask the question, should we have a registry of registries? And there are actually several good attempts being made at this. And as I looked at them, I realized they're actually in several categories. One are simply indexes. So OrphanNet, Segalene showed us yesterday, lists of the registries available in different countries. We run one, Genetic Alliance runs one called Disease Info Search with the 7,000 rare diseases and whether or not there are registries available for them. The next level would be federated registries, where we would look at keeping the registry structures where they are in the world and examining whether or not they had common data elements and could be aggregated in some way across conditions. And so EpiRare is an example in Europe, and the NIH Rare Disease Research Network that's been mentioned earlier today as well. And then there are integrated registries on a single platform, building on the PXE database registry biobank infrastructure. In 2003, Genetic Alliance established the Genetic Alliance Registry and Biobank. There are many diseases in there. They are using the same platform. They're a cross-disease registry. So they are a registry of many registries, but are integrated more than the others. So what about disease-centric cross-industry registries? We don't really see those yet, and so we've begun working on those with a couple of companies, looking at what could be done to stop siloing these registries, to also not fragment these populations further. They're already very fragmented. There's been some examples in some rare diseases that a company will do a trial and then a new possibility will come along, a new lead, and they can't do a second trial with a second company because the people are captured in the first registry. So we've been looking at, are there ways to call this pre-competitive, to put it into a space that many companies can use to actually be able to look at common data elements, to make sure that it's interoperable, do everything in a standards-based kind of platform, have it be customizable, have it be role-based. So if you're going to do outcomes research and you don't want another company to see that data can be role-based permissions for that. And then have policies for access and certain policies for commercialization. What does industry benefit with this? Next. Certainly, it's more cost-effective. I think as we get more and more possibilities for treatments and therapies and diagnostics for rare diseases, we're not going to want to create registries for these. Even if we count diseases the way Segaline was counting them yesterday, it's still 1,200 registries, then multiplied by X number of products, and so we're winding up again with thousands. Also increasing the speed of recruiting. We see clinical trials fail every day in common diseases even because it's too hard to recruit for these trials. The rare disease communities are very, very centralized in some sense and also really engaged with each other. This would make it much easier if there were some kinds of federated, at least, registries. Greater power for studies. We need to have more and more individuals enrolled in these. We need leadership for a culture of sharing, and so I think the companies that will first step forward in this project with us will be considered leaders and will be considered companies that are seeing into the new business models that I think will make the new research more able. And then I think this will also aid in the public perception of good being done by both biotech and pharmaceutical companies. So we want to make sure we have easy access for all, that these are not hurdles or barriers like we've been talking about all day today. Next. And so we want to use the long tail. Someone else already mentioned the long tail. It's worked really well for me to be able to buy any book I want on the planet, just about. If 5 years ago I had stood here and said my interest is in earthworms that only live in clay-like soil in Lebanon, you would have said, good luck finding anything about that, but I can easily find a book about that in somebody's garage or cellar and buy it now. So we need to use the same kind of technology in medicine. We don't. Medicine is a cottage industry and lags far behind other industries, but just like eBay and Amazon and these other Netflix, et cetera, we need to use the same kind of technologies, and so long tail technology will be very useful in rare disease space. We're building something called Registry Lite, and there's actually some other examples of this as well. We may hear about a few of these today. Platforms that we can use to simply engage individuals with rare diseases and put them all in registries to start that are light, and then move them to registries that are more useful in terms of all the things that the prior speaker spoke about in terms of natural history and clinical studies, et cetera. The data entry has to be easy. People are very facile with Facebook and with Google and with other kinds of platforms. They don't want onerous DOS systems that look really difficult. And then we really need to use the providers and patients themselves to drive this stuff. It's not going to be able to be done in a completely top-down manner. The grassroots are really going to power this as we go along. So this is a picture of a deli, and in the United States, this is very common, a delicatessen, especially in New York, and essentially you go up to the deli counter and you take a number, and somebody calls your number 15, and you say, yeah, I want salami and I want cheese. There is no deli number in rare diseases. We discovered that ourselves personally, and I think each of us have discovered that in different ways, and so we need to be proactive about figuring out ways to do this, including for example, herding the cats. And I talked about this yesterday. I think we're both talking about getting scientists to work together, but the other cats are all the people with rare diseases, very hard to find, needles in haystacks, all that. I think the registries done well with good access, especially in these kind of light versions, give everybody access, and that's very important. This is a photo, a screenshot from Genetic Alliance website on biobanks and registries, giving the tools to advocacy groups they need to be able to build these registries themselves, and either, again, using a platform that's add, water, and serve, like our biobank and registry platform, or building their own. So I think what this creates when we move into a place where advocacy organizations can be really dynamically involved with the industry is solutions to things that are difficult. So ethical issues, and I won't go into them all, we all know lots of them. Issues around re-identification, whether or not it's ever able to be really truly anonymized once you have DNA involved. Incidental findings have begun to have a lot of consideration. What are you going to do with them? We're going to find them when we start to do particularly genomic analysis. Return of results, who gets results back and when do they get them? Reporting so that the patients stay involved and want to continue to be involved in your projects, and follow-up so they understand what's happening. So there's some key principles, I think, that come out of working with disease groups, with advocacy groups, with industry. Sustainable stewardship. It's hard when a registry is run by NIH or by the Wellcome Trust or by a company. They're going to be involved or interested as long as their funding holds out and their interest holds out. Disease advocacy organizations, however, are interested forever in that specific condition, and so they're good stewards. Open access, again, how much can we keep in the pre-competitive space so that many can have access? Some of the solutions are going to come from a smart high school student who's a mathematician, not from somebody who's done research all their lives. Very active engagement of the affected individuals, their representatives, both in the governance of the repository and in the reporting as well. State-of-the-art, flexible, extensible technologies. Cross-condition phenotype-based systems, we're going to need to work across diseases as well. Once we get these pathways, if something like exon skipping works, it's going to work for many diseases. We want to have a lot of patients who are ready and able and cohorts that are well characterized. And then cost-effective solutions, because sharing this kind of infrastructure will make a big difference. And so what we're looking at, I think, are dynamic data-driving solutions, allowing us to use the information to serve the people who we really care about, and at the same time figuring out ways to keep that in a kind of commons, a place where all of us can share that information. Thank you.
That was really I got surprised that you were ready so quickly, and very nice presentation. There is actually time for one or two questions still, Sharon, so please stay with us for a while. Anyone who, have to accommodate myself here, anyone who wants to ask anything about this overview and about this registry of registries, do you think that's going to work? Well, I have a question to you. Oh yeah, there's a question here, Samantha.
I don't do questions, do I?
No, you do comments.
I do comments.
Yes.
I think if we're talking about the registry of registries, I think we really need to understand what the fundamental difference is between this. And there's a lot, I always talk from the European perspective, and I apologize for that, but we're nearly in Europe. The registry of the registries, so particularly in France at the moment, there is an initiative that's called BAMARA, if anybody is in France. And here we're talking about collecting core data elements on all rare diseases. So we're really trying to get absolute complete coverage, but those are not really questions that would interest the different patient groups or specific disease areas. And then what we're doing then is we're piggybacking what we call databases or the cohorts of patients onto this registry of registries. So in a way, to answer your question, I think really, yes, it can work, but it's two different things. The registry of registries is very different to the stuff that we are doing from an industry perspective in disease-specific areas.
So I think if I had a laptop here and my Prezi back up, and I don't have a laptop so it's not going to work, I could go back to a part of my Prezi map in which I did show that actually there are 3 different kinds, and that is one kind, and that there are several efforts that are AHRQ in the US, Genetic Alliance Biobank are doing the core kinds of things that you're talking about as well. And then there are other initiatives that are just aggregating how many registries are there, that sort of thing. So yes, they are different. And again, you know, we can always have the conversation about what the one end of the continuum where it says we absolutely have to know what we want before we even start the registry, all the way to the hypothesis generating registries. And somewhere along that continuum, we're going to keep sliding the bar along, and different registries will answer different questions. Charlie?
Just a question. Who are your beta testers? Who signed up here enthusiastic to be the first people part of this?
So
Question at the end?
the question is, who are the beta testers who've signed up enthusiastically to be part of this group? So the first test was certainly to do this cross-disease. And so in 2003, 7 disease groups came together and put their data all together in a shared platform, again with these role-based permissions so that, for example, I cannot see the psoriasis data. So we have psoriasis, breast cancer, we have common diseases, and we have rare diseases. In the industry realm, there are a number of companies who are, right now, we are kind of scoping this whole thing. So they have not actually put their data sets into this or rolled registries either prospectively or retrospectively into this yet, but that we're in the kind of creating the registry kind of mode. The platforms, because we've tested them since 2003, are pretty robust, they're customizable, they have web interfaces, that sort of stuff. So that part we're not at all worried about. What's challenging, of course, is the different uses for all these different registries. Some are being used for phase 4 studies, some of them are being used for natural history, and making sure that the registry can accommodate all of that.
We have also a question on the far left side. Matthew, do you have a microphone for the far left side?
Matthew stays trim during this.
Yeah, exactly. That's good.
Thank you. I don't know if I'm supposed to ask questions since I am kind of stowaway in this conference. I am a journalist and the most ignorant one. And the reason I come here is precisely to ask very simple question which I have been asking for 20 years without finding the answer. It is now near half a century since the advent of so-called medical informatics. And initially, for the first generation, medical informatics were meant in short, invoicing. Medical file was laid light years behind. It was invoicing. But I still cannot understand why WHO, the World Health Organization, cannot coordinate an effort with all public hospitals worldwide, and why not even networks of private hospitals and network of doctors, to have a common anonymous format for medical file. And this would trigger a huge revolution in epidemiological studies, and it's very simple, and since it is simple and good for mankind and civilization, probably all the medical corps will oppose it.
Okay, so my probably somewhat uninformed personal opinion about this is that in other industries, we have seen the consumers in those industries drive that kind of amalgamation. So, for example, the thing I think about in that realm is we all can go almost to any bank in the world and take our money out of the bank or put money into the bank or whatever we want to do because of the credit cards. When credit cards were introduced, the banks said, we have different software systems, we have privacy issues, we're not going to talk to each other. And what happened were consumers said, we don't want to go to one country or another, even to one state or another in the US, and not be able to have this kind of interoperability and data sharing. And I think in medicine that does not happen, that consumers believe that somebody else should take care of it and that we should not step up and demand it. I completely agree with you that if we took the data that already exists and the systems that already exist, like hospitals, and aggregated that information, we would be light years ahead. Right now, if you go to most hospitals and say, do you have somebody with, and name your rare disease, they have no idea because it's on somebody's card or they wrote it down and put it in a drawer or something. So while I absolutely agree with that, I think until we get consumers, people who care because their health is at stake, stepping up to the plate, we're not going to get that kind of change from the top down where the hospitals themselves or where the public health departments all across the world make that decision themselves. I think it's a sad thing.
Isn't that great? Somebody's looking for 20 years for the answer to the question. Right at this conference.
Still didn't get it.
You got it. Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you very much for all your questions.